Hi and welcome to part 2 of my AHSOKA Season 7 Lekku tutorial. In this section I'll be covering how to strengthen the montrals, craft and attach the Lekku tails, and how to blend the seams. We will start by applying paper mache all over the montrals. You will need a pair of scissors, some paper towel, PVA glue, a small container, and of course the montrals. I'll also be using a wooden stick to mix the PVA and water together, but you can just use your fingers. Lay out your mat and start tearing up your paper towels. I usually cut them into smaller pieces to make them easier to work with. Squeeze some PVA into your pot and thin it down with some water. Mix it together with a stick or your fingers. Now you're ready to start dipping the paper towel into the glue and applying it to the montrals. Once you have covered the montrals, leave it to dry. The montrals should now look like this. As you can see, they're still quite flexible, so add another layer of paper mache. Now the montrals should look like this. They have a bit of flex to them, but are rigid enough to retain the shape. For the next step, we will need our Lekku tail templates. Make sure to print them at the same scale as the montrals, otherwise they may not fit. For the Lekku tails, I'll be using matte white spandex. Lie your spandex right side down onto a cutting mat or table. Place your back Lekku tail on top of your spandex. Use fabric weights or something heavy to hold the template down. I like to use washable fabric pens on spandex, but make sure that you read the instructions and do a quick test on a swatch before continuing. Trace around the whole template. Cut out your Lekku tail, making sure to leave a seam allowance. I usually leave about 1.5 centimeters or 5/8 of an inch. Cut out another back Lekku tail. You will not need to mark out your fabric, just an approximate shape will do. Take your front Lekku tail template and place it on top of your spandex. Trace around it. You don't need to trace the whole straight edge, just a small amount to help you line it up when you flip it over. Flip your template over and repeat. Cut out your Lekku tail, making sure to leave a seam allowance. Cut the straight edge at the top. You can use scissors for this, it doesn't have to be perfect. Cut out one more front Lekku tail. Fold your Lekku tail in half as shown, right sides together, and use fabric clips to secure it. Repeat for the other front Lekku tail. Take your two back Lekku tails and lie one on top of the other, right sides together, and secure with clips. Cut the top edge along the line. Next, you can stitch and secure the Lekku tails. I used an overlocker for this, but you can also use a sewing machine. I recommend using the triple straight stitch. If your machine doesn't have this function, use a straight stitch with a strong thread and go over it twice. Once you have sewn all of your Lekku tails, wash out the fabric pen. This is the result. Turn each tail inside out. They are now ready for stuffing. You will need some weights. I usually use rice or couscous, some fibre-filled stuffing, a glue gun, and some pins. You will also need some beanbag beads. However, if you prefer, you can use fibre fill instead. I recommend filling one tail at a time. Pour couscous into a Lekku tail. You can decide how much weight you want to add. Fill the tail with beanbag beads, leaving about 2 inches at the top empty. Stuff the top with some fibre fill. Next, take your montrals and pull the tail over and around the base as shown. This can be a bit fiddly, so I like to use pins to help secure it in place, but be extra careful when putting your hand inside the montrals. In areas that aren't looking very smooth, add some extra stuffing to even it out. Fill your other Lekku tail like you did before and repeat the process. Both sides should now look something like this. Repeat the same process with the back Lekku tail. Your Lekku should now look something like this. Take your hot glue gun, remove one pin at a time and glue the spandex to the montrals. Be careful not to burn your fingers. On the inside especially, I recommend using a wooden stick on the spandex to avoid burning your fingers. The next step is to apply foam clay to the uneven areas such as the back. It's quite obvious where the montrals meet with the spandex, so I use the clay to make this more seamless. Water can also be used to help smooth out the clay. If you need, apply some clay to the front Lekku seams as well. You should now have something that looks like this. I recommend putting the Lekku on a polystyrene head and mounting it onto a stand or tripod. This will make the rest of the steps much easier, but it's not essential. The next step is to apply filler. I suggest wrapping the tails in some cling film to protect the surface. Since filler can be quite messy, I put a mat down underneath. The product I'll be using is One Strike Filler, a cheap brand of wool filler I found on Amazon. Make sure that it's lightweight and sandable. Non-shrinking is a bonus. I also recommend wearing gloves for this as well. You'll also need some water to help smooth out the filler and reduce sanding. Start applying the filler to the Lekku, ensuring to cover a little bit of the seam between the montrals and spandex. Once it's all applied, take some water and smooth the filler with your fingers. Again, I recommend that you wear gloves to protect your skin. I'm not wearing any here, but I haven't had any skin reactions to this product in the past. Leave the filler to dry. Your Lekku should now look like this, and it's ready for sanding. Make sure that you're in a well-ventilated area. You will need to wear a dust mask and will need a variety of sandpaper grits. I used 120, 180 and 200. Start sanding the montrals, starting with a rough grit, and work your way to a finer grit. Once you finish sanding, take a big brush or a cloth to wipe away all the dust. The spandex will still need some more blending, and there are some imperfections on the surface, so I'll be using a pot of water and some flexible cork. Ensure that the cork is acrylic based and not silicone based. Apply it with a cork gun over the seam and smooth it with your finger. You will also need to apply water over the top to get it really smooth and help it blend. Continue all over the other seams. I also use the cork and more filler to fill small cracks and holes on the surface and smooth it with water. Continue filling and sanding until you're happy with the results. Next, you will need a pair of gloves, a sponge which is optional, a paintbrush, and some white acrylic paint. Apply the paint to the montrals. I use a sponge to get rid of the brush strokes, but that's just my preference. Continue to paint the rest of the montrals and allow it to dry. I usually apply about 3 layers of paint. Once painted, the Lekku should look like this. And that's all for part 2.